Before moving to leaders' questions, privilege to welcome the distinguished ambassador to Ireland from Palestine in our distinguished visitors gallery. I think, Ambassador, you know how fondly you're thought of here in this House. Now, we move to leaders' questions, and this time I call on Deputy Matt Carthy, please.
Carmaigat Cancorla. Taoiseach, what has happened in recent days in Jenin and the West Bank amounts to a egregious violation of international law and standards on the use of force and may constitute a war crime. They are not my words, they are the words of experts from the United Nations. 12 Palestinians were murdered by Israeli forces, 5 of them were children. Thousands were forced from their homes in refugee camps, by the way. When they returned, many of those homes had been destroyed. Water and electricity services were cut, roads had been bombarded. Israel had managed to make refugees out of refugees. For years, in defiance of UN resolutions, the Israeli government has been carrying out indiscriminate attacks on Palestine as the occupation of the Palestinian territory and apartheid intensifies. It is shameful. This morning I met with the Palestinian ambassador to Ireland, and I want to join the Cancorla in welcoming her to this House this afternoon. I extended to her our solidarity with the Palestinian people, and I take this opportunity to do so again. Our thoughts and solidarity and prayers are with them at this time, but they need more than that. The actions of Israel are, as ever, undermining efforts to secure a sustainable and peaceful two-state solution. Their actions must be urgently challenged by the international community. Without sanction or adequate diplomatic response, I fear that we are going to see more innocent civilians killed in the coming days, weeks, months, years. It is long past time that the international community, and the European Union in particular, took action in response to Israeli aggression and oppression and acted to defend the rights of the people of Palestine. And the onus is also on your government, Taoiseach, to respond robustly. The world must say stop, and Ireland must lead the way. This House has adopted very strong resolutions with cross-party support demanding that an end to Israeli occupation and annexation of Palestinian lands. What we now need to see is action from the government, and we need action from you as Minister for Foreign Affairs. We must take measures to end the EU's preferential trading relationship with Israel. We should start by withdrawing Irish state investment from companies that operate in the occupied territory, as outlined in John Brady's bill currently before this House. We should also pass the Occupied Territories Bill, because the Palestinian people need our solidarity, but they need much more than that. Because history tells us that Israel will not stop without a strong international response. Only a sustained campaign by the international community to call out Israel's continual war crimes against the Palestinian people will make them stop. The government must now also move to formally recognise the state of Palestine. The Dáil passed a Sinn Féin motion to that effect in 2014. The Seanad did likewise. But your government has continued to drag its heels. So I would urge you to do so at this critical time and to make a stand for peace and progress in the Middle East and to formally recognise the state of Palestine. Taoiseach, when will you do that? And what other actions will you take on behalf of the Irish people that can be an example to the world, that will show the world that aggression, annexation, apartheid and occupation will not be tolerated anywhere? What actions will you take in the face of the ongoing breaches of international law by Israel against the people of Palestine?
Thank you, Deputy Carthy.
Could I, first of all, thank the Deputy for raising the situation in Palestine and the unacceptable attacks on Jenin and the escalation by the Israeli government, which I condemn, of violent incursions into the West Bank generally. And the last 2 years have seen a significant escalation in such incursions and violence, which has led to a dramatic increase in the loss of life, and particularly the loss of civilian life within the West Bank itself. And we have articulated our strongest concern, and we condemn the incursion into Jenin. It's part of a very, very worrying escalation of violence over the recent weeks and months. And Israel has a legal responsibility, as well as a moral responsibility, as the occupying power, to protect all civilians in the occupied Palestinian territory. And we have worked with like-minded states within Europe, with Jordan and others, to press for a de-escalation in the first instance of the violence, not just in Jenin, but across the West Bank and Gaza as well. And we're increasingly concerned also by the increase in settler violence in the West Bank, which has resulted in civilian deaths, injuries, and significant property damage. All perpetrators must be held accountable. In terms of the broader issues, Ireland is known at the European Union and the United Nations as being one of the strongest countries that consistently raises the violation of international law and the UN Charter in respect of Palestine. Ireland is recognised globally as supporting Palestinian rights, and human rights in particular, and in that context, strongly supporting a two-state solution. And it's always a balance as to the levers that one uses to try and get the best outcome in this situation, realising our own limitations as well. But suffice to say that in the context of our support of UNRWA, for example, and at the United Nations in terms of our recent support of the resolution in terms of holding Israel account into the National Court, when I met President Abbas and when I met with the Prime Minister from Palestine, these were measures that they wanted us to pursue, which we did, and we did support them. My own party, Fianna Fáil, has had a long history of supporting Palestinians' right to a homeland, and indeed it was the late Brian Lenihan Sr., who I think was the first European politician at a ministerial level who recognised Palestinians' right to a homeland. There is a need to build stronger consensus, frankly, across the European Union. A number of, when I say like-minded countries who have very strong views here on this, we need to persuade more, to be frank, within the European Union towards the need for justice here and to create a credible pathway to a two-state solution. The real worry and concern here is that the two-state solution is becoming increasingly unviable. And in my view, Israel's ultimate security, which it always puts forward as its rationale for its behaviour, in my view becomes untenable in the context of not having a two-state solution. In other words, it makes sense that you get on with your neighbours, that you work with your, and so forth, to create a peaceful environment. What's happening here is a shocking escalation of violence by a government that has moved perceptibly obviously to the far right in terms of its composition.
Thank you. Now we're over time.
And with very dangerous ideas within that government.
Deputy Carthy.
Taoiseach, yes, two-state solution is becoming increasingly inviable and unviable. The reason for that is very simple. It is the actions of the State of Israel in their pursuit of absolutely humiliation of the Palestinian people, which appears to be their only goal at this time. I welcome the strong words from you and from successive ministers for foreign affairs from this state, and I recognise that you are in a minority of EU ministers in that regard. But I can tell you, and you should have the absolute confidence, that you are in the majority of humanity that are absolutely disgusted by the ongoing actions of Israel. They are disgusted by the lack of an international response. So I have to put it to you, consensus would be fantastic and would be preferable at an EU level. But in order for a consensus to be reached, at some point somebody is going to have to show leadership. And I think Ireland is best placed to be the state that shows that leadership by taking action, by forcing the hand of others internationally to actually take a robust response in regard to what is happening. And the first thing that we can do is simply recognise the state of Palestine as agreed by both houses of these Oireachtas. And my question again, Minister, when will you do that?
Thank you.
Thank the Deputy for raising the issue. The programme for government states that the government will honour our commitment to recognise the state of Palestine as part of a lasting settlement of the conflict, or in advance of that, when we believe doing so will progress efforts to reach a two-state solution or to protect the integrity of the Palestinian territory. we could go solo and do it next week or next year. Well, what impact would that have? Is a really serious question we have to ask. What impact would it have? There's a very strong argument that having a stronger collective voice with quite a number of significant EU member states and others, if we join forces and collectively recognise the state of Palestine, that would be far more impactful than just one country going it alone. That's a judgment call, Deputy. I accept that. But it's one that I think has to, as I said earlier, the levers one use to create pressure on the Israeli government are ones that have to be, ones where judgment has to be applied and applied carefully in that regard. One issue we have been pushing for at EU level is the need for an association agreement with the Palestinian Authority, and a number of us have put that forward to Giuseppe Borrell and others, that is required. A much stronger relationship between the European Union and the Palestinian Authority.